Applejack growled and pulled again at the restraint on her hoof. She couldn't make any progress. She decided it was time for a last resort. She bit down on the restraint and tugged at it with her teeth, gnawing at the best that she could. Applejack was feeling frantic. The room was becoming more and more overcrowded by the minute, and all of these unfriendly faces were staring down as she struggled. "Get away, you hear? Get away!" Applejack screamed. She thrashed wildly while biting down harder on the restraint, pulling as hard as she was able. "Try some tonic," Flim and Flam offered. "Stand back," Applejack warned. "Come now, Applejack. It can't hurt to try. We'll show you. It's easy," Flim said. He poured the contents of the tonic over the restraint to her hoof. She felt the warm liquid pouring down on her leg and turned up to her nose at the scent. It reminded her of a rustic coin. She pulled again on the restraint and her hoof finally came free. "You see that?" Flam said with a smirk. "You don't need your tonic, and I don't need you," Applejack said. Now that she had one hoof free, she could easily unlatch the other. She pulled the IVs from her legs and leapt out of the bed. "You, don't get that tonic on my perfect mane," Trixie whined. She then stand back from Applejack. Applejack looking down at herself as she noticed that Flim and Flam's tonic had somehow gone over her fur and was continuing to drip freely from her hoof. "What's this stuff anyway?" Applejack asked. "What did you do to me?" "Why didn't I do a young filly? I'm only a business pony after all," Filthy Rich said. Applejack turned to him and her eyes narrowed. "You," she growled. "I remember you." She charged at him, but she was somehow able to dodge her advances. "It's just good business," he said, unfazed by Applejack's anger. "You were going to take the farm," Applejack said, had finally able to get some thoughts in order. "But nothing you can do about it now, young lady," Filthy Rich said with a smirk. "You want to bet?" Applejack growled. 4 ponies shuffled along the dismal while in the hallways of Ponyville Hospital, and it had bounced. Twilight fell behind her friends and couldn't make out the tears or the same guilt she felt for Applejack's condition. Once she learned of what happened, she knew she was to blame. Doctors had refused Applejack's visitors for the first few days to regain her sanity. They contacted Twilight personally when they thought medically stumped as to why. She wasn't responding to the sedatives. Twilight pored all over the notes, gleaning everything that she had been on the subject of the potion she's ever mastered. Book after useless book was thrown in disarray, while she and her friends waited to see her allying friend. When the time had come at last, the weeks after the internal incident, Twilight felt like nothing short of complete failure. All she learned was the potion, and advertently created was a robbing of Applejack in her sleep, but there was no known cure. Pinkie Pie happily bouncing in denial, pausing at the door and glared out loud. "We're here!" She turned to see the hopeful smiles of her friends, with the exception of Twilight, who still hung her head in shame. "Come now, darling. Applejack will forgive you. It was an honest mistake and you were only trying to help," Rarity offered. "Forgive me? She may not even recognize me. The terrible things to the ponies, they didn't sleep, Rarity. Some pony had to be awake this long to never done this before. All else considered, Applejack should be dead by now," Twilight snapped, while shaking in her own hooves. "Well, that's not very cheery. We're supposed to be cheery, remember?" Pinkie Pie said. "Well, it's not like we have to run into these kinds of problems before you figure out, Twi. AJ will be fine," Rainbow Dash assured. "Yeah," Twilight said, her voice shaky. "You're probably right." She knew her friends were a lie. Knew it was a lie, and not convincing one bit. But it was all the permission that they needed to press onward. No pony knew what to expect when they opened the door. They were surprised to see the lights that were off, and were on the momentarily hope that Applejack might have finally fallen asleep. While Rainbow Dash searched for the wall for the switch, all the ponies turned up their noses at the strange smell. "Is that—" Rarity started, but was cut off by Fluttershy's frill of terror moments before the lights flickered on. "Blood!" Twilight cried. All the other ponies could stare at the horror of the chaos in the room. The hospital bed was thrown up against one of the walls, Medical equipment was strewn in every corner. Restraints were empty, but one of the upper corner left of the bed was gnawed clean and fruit caked in a layer of blood. The blood smears were on the walls, and that showed quite a bit of struggle that had taken place. It didn't take any ponies that long to notice open the window, and a trail of blood led from it. "She couldn't have gone far. Come on," Rainbow Dash said, soaring out of the window in pursuit. "Well, what she's gonna do, Twilight? Will she hurt herself again?" Fluttershy asked. I don't know. We have to go and find her. Now." Applejack's disappearance was only the beginning. When her friends were unable to find her within hours of discovery, they widened her search to no avail. Days passed with no sign of the Earth Pony, and needed to make matters worse, no other ponies in Ponyville vanished within close proximity. The heat combined with the unknown had left much of Ponyville as a blind panic, including a particular green unicorn called Lara Heartstrings. When she discovered Bonbon was missing from their home in that evening, she didn't hesitate to assume the worst. Her mind went into overdrive, pushing her onwards despite the risk of wandering alone. She had to find her. And when she had searched everywhere, Bonbon could have possibly been Sugar Cube Corner. Maybe she was talking to the cakes about the new recipe. Vinny and Octavia's house. That they said they hadn't seen her in a few days. Maybe Fluttershy's cottage, of course. She probably went for some more fresh eggs for the current batch of treats that she was making. Laria continued to gallop, praying and hoping that Bonbon was safe. She saw a figure coming into focus among the clearing. They were slumped slowly, making their way along the trail. Applejack? She recognized how disheveled the young filly's hat was from afar. She galloped next to her. "Thank goodness. All of Ponyville was worried sick about you. Have you been Bonbon? All the sorts of ponies have gone missing, and not even Princess Twilight had been able to control the panic. But if you were there, then there's hopes, right? Maybe Bonbon and the others are okay too. Wait, what happened to you? Oh, my Celestia, are you all right?" Applejack slowly tilted her head up from the ground to meet the green unicorn's gaze. The haunting glare from her pinprick pupils and dark circles around her eyes sent a terrifying shiver down Lyra's back. Catching her off guard, she retreated and away in confusion. "Should I call some pony?" she asked timidly. Taking in true nature of Applejack's appearance and horror, she had to use a handkerchief haphazardly to stop the bleeding on her left front hoof. There were a good chunk of flesh were missing. The restraint marks on her hoof were still present from the excessive thrashing, and old dirt bandages clung loosely up at the back of her legs. Her skin looked aged and tired from even having some usual orange color, marred with scars of the branches that had fallen over many weeks ago. Her mane and tail were unkempt, and although she still wore that iconic hat, had been too casually to fall in the debris and unknown events that followed. All Applejack could make out from behind her was haunted stare that was the outline of Filthy Rich. The pony had been pursuing her aimlessly, wandering. The image in the chaotic brain had given him was marked by an unholy grin, and the likes of which threatened her to the very core, and they had hit the road. When Lyra regained her consciousness, she found that she had been restrained to what seemed like an old stump or tree. Her front hoofs were then secured above her head, and something sharp had she tried to move, it sent shearing pain along her hooves, and a fresh trail of blood that trickled down from her brow. Her heart started beating faster, and her breaths became more hard and labored. Her torso was crushed against the apple tree in what assumed to be a rope, limiting the use of her lungs. Slowly Lyra's senses began to intake her surroundings. A rancid color of odor of death and decay grew under every labored breath. She thrashed her head back and forth, trying to avoid the trail of blood from her hooves getting in her eyes. It took several minutes for the immense headache and blurred vision to ease enough for her to see where she was. At first she could only make out trees and a sunset. She guessed that she was in some part of the apple family orchard that had long forgotten by the evidence from the mangled, overgrown branches and piles of dried leaves littering around them. Her vision progressed, and she realized that the strange lumps on the trees weren't branches, and the piles below them weren't leaves. She closed her eyes tightly, and her mind putting the pieces together, as her other senses were violated by her current reality. On the other intake, the rancid color odor, her eyes flew open, and she let out an ear-piercing scream of terror. The remains of the missing ponies of Ponyville had been the objects that had seen her in haze, or rather that was left out of them. Gardening tools and a worn rope had torn the apple trunks, holding the sparest pieces of the ponies that had once been held in the place. The rest of said ponies laid in mishapen heaps of the base of the trees, bones, entrails, and colorful coats were now stained with crimson odor of their death carried in the breeze. The tree directly adjacent to Lyra's showed a worn, bloodied hole that had sharpened and had slammed into a tree trunk. Resting on top of the blade was a head of Bonbon, the terror still stamped clearly on her face from her final moments of life. The rest of Bonbon's body had not been completely severed by the hoe. Her spine was exposed around the neck, and her broken body hung awkwardly around it. Lyra sobbed openly, too traumatized to understand what was happening, or how to get herself out of harm's way. "Look who finally decided to join us," Applejack whispered. "Applejack?" Lyra gasped in relief. "Thanks, Celestia. Hurry and get me down from—" Applejack effectively silenced her when she lassoed a rope around Lyra's neck and pulled it tight, effectively choking her words. "'Tain't that very nice, you know," she said, staring at her with unforgiving eyes. "Every time you talk, you try to talk some sense into ya, you refuse to listen. Ya up and die, you see." Lyra then sputtered and gagged, still trying to process what she had seen connect to the carnage to the pony that she once called a friend. "But y'all can keep bringing ya back, and you know you rich ponies are much better than us country ponies. So much clever. But every time you try and hide, ya find don't ya?" "Applejack," Lyra groaned, her voice barely at above a whisper. "I'm not—" "Shut your up, trap," Applejack screamed, slamming a shovel against the unicorn's head so violently that it caused the skull to fracture. "Y'all had the chance to speak. It's my turn. We apples have been on this farm for nearly 4 generations. Why we founded this town? If my granny hadn't—" Lyra whimpered weakly in confusion, until at the point she hadn't made a sound. "I said shut up." "That's rude, and where you're— Oh, I get it. And Pinkie Pie was handing them out like they were free samples. Wait, no, that was Rarity," Applejack muttered under her breath. "And then Fluttershy wanted to gather them up like they were some critters, and y'all just gonna have none of it. You hear?" Lyra was hyperventilating at this point, using all of her strength to catch under her breath with the grip of the rope. "Who are you?" Applejack snapped. "What are you doing here? And these are my apple trees. Who sent you?" Lyra could only reply by looking at Applejack in the eye, trying to converse her plea for mercy. "He sent you, didn't he? He wants the farm. You're a spy," Applejack screamed angrily. She released the rope from under her hoof, allowing Lyra to breathe again. She gasped for several moments, grateful that the oxygen she had not yet been denied. She hadn't noticed Applejack's momentary absence until it was too late. Applejack screamed and then thrust in the shovel the mare's side, slicing it open on contact. "We don't take too kindly for spies around here," Applejack whispered. She pulled the shovel loose and stared at the fresh blood in its blade. "You can tell your boss filthy rich, and you ain't getting this farm." "Please," Lyra gasped in moments, before the shovel punctured her skin a second time. She cried out in weak agony, feeling the warm blood seep into her lungs rapidly. "You've all worked a lot too hard to get some city pony to help with deep pockets take." Applejack started, but was cut off by Lyra coughed up blood and accidentally spat on her face. Applejack breathed slowly, allowing the anger to come to a boil. She screamed again and thrusted the shovel at the mare every time she dared splashed her with blood. By the time she finished, Lyra barely looked like a mare at all. She was just the loose hanging remains of the demolished creature. "Filthy?" Applejack asked, looking at Lyra's remains and then all around her. Got away again, she hissed under her breath. Don't you worry, y'all find ya. Y'all keep looking. You can't hide forever, you coward, she said, pulling the garden shears loose from her hooves and held it in place of the trunk. Lara's remains sloshed awkwardly onto the ground, feeling the rope that had been around her torso. Applejack's movements were slow and deliberate, aside from the occasional twitch, determined to punish Filthy Rich for his crimes. She felt her little corner of the orchard in pursuit, unaware that his remains had already been painted in the orchard floor from Applejack's rage. The orchard was eerie, an ever-free forest, and there were free little fillies shuffling along the many paths. Apple Bloom led her friends deeper into the fields with a single-minded determination. For a short time after her sister's hospitalization, Apple Bloom had believed Granny Smith when she had claimed that her sister wasn't well enough to be visited. However, when the weeks passed with no word, the Crusaders demanded to see Applejack in the hospital, only to be turned away by the staff each time. Every now and new doctor in the nursery they had seen give an explanation of Philly's a different explanation for the denial of their visit, before hastily ushering them out of the door. Soon after, the rumors started spreading. Whispers of disappearances around Ponyville had surfaced. Miss Cheerily addressed the confusion and panic by insisting that the ponies were falling ill from heat stroke and that were sent to the hospital for recovery. Apple Bloom didn't buy it, especially when unspoken increase in security could be seen around Ponyville. Fillies like Crusaders were no longer permanent outside of their homes past sunset, in order by Princess Twilight herself. With her every new lie told, Apple Bloom's patience wore thin and her temper flared. She knew if she were to get away with any answers, she would have to find them herself. The ponies were so distracted by the unchanging heat of that day and the panic of the night that it wasn't so difficult for the free fillies to stage their escape. They had arranged their harmless play dates with Fluttershy's cottage, reaffirming themselves such a thing that would brighten their spirits. They knew that Fluttershy spread herself thin, caring for the other animals stuffing under the heat, and that might be every pony could evade. Although she was hesitant, Fluttershy agreed, hoping that the convey would point out the feints that were hopeless as ponies feared. The night had begun incoherently, though. Enough playing games with Fluttershy and her animals, with forced laughter and smiles. When it came to the sleep, Fluttershy was no fool. She posted her bear friend at the door as a formal guard. The Crusaders were told that this was a precaution to keep them safe, but they knew it was to prevent them from sneaking out at night like they had before. She couldn't count on, however, was Harry the bear's distracting appetite, how he could easily be persuaded away from his post by the scent of honey. Sweetie Belle had a delectable jar outside of the door window with her magic, and Scootaloo flapped her little wings to send the scent his way. Within minutes, the Crusaders had evaded Fluttershy's security and were alone in the darkness again. "It's too hot. I want to go back," Sweetie Belle whined, making the leaf fall from the branch nearby from far from her as she walked. Scootaloo reared up on her hind legs and flapped her wings rapidly, causing a little breeze for her friend. "Thanks," Sweetie Belle said, having a grateful sigh. "We can't go back. Do you know how much trouble we're going to be in?" Apple Bloom chimed, standing right next to Sweetie Belle to enjoy the breeze before Scootaloo flopped back to the ground in fatigue. "Well then, where are we going here anyway?" Scootaloo muttered. "I told ya. Big Mac says there's a bunch of tools missing from the barn. And just yesterday I heard him tell Granny that he found one of them in the West Orchard," Apple Bloom said confidently. "But what does this have to do with Applejack?" Scootaloo asked. "Don't you see? Only Applejack and Big Mac know where they kept all the tools. There was nothing else wrong with the barn. Checked it myself." "But what if she went to the barn? Why not just go home?" Sweetie Belle asked. "Well, Granny said there was something wrong with Applejack's mind, and she didn't know who she was or go well with the other ponies either. That's why she had to stay in the hospital for so long. Maybe she just got confused and got tired and went back to work on the trees and got lost." Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo exchanged worried glances, hearing Apple Bloom tell the story to them. Now it didn't seem quite exhilarating, as if it was planning to go out on their own. Neither of the little fillies had the little heart to tell Apple Bloom that her ideas were a long shot at best, and missing tools didn't explain the other pony disappearances. From a lack of response, Apple Bloom was continued. I just wanted to see if we could find something in the west orchard that may have Bother didn't see. He was might tired from the heat that he found on the old rake, but he didn't think it was going to come back again for a little while. Can't we just let Applejack get more lost? What if we get lost? Sweetie Belle said in a hushed tone. Don't worry, you know where I'm going, Apple Bloom insisted, pressing onwards and faking a look of certainty. That's an awful smell, Scootaloo chimed, covering her nose with her front hoof. Sweetie Belle and Apple Bloom following the suit. Ew, it smells like... Sweetie Belle trailed off. Like the time we found a dead skunk next to the clubhouse, Scootaloo finished. Girls? Apple Bloom stammered, stopping dead in her tracks. Does that look like dried blood to you? She pointed at the dead patch of grass-stained crimson hoof steps that led further into the orchard. I think it's time we go back now, Sweetie Belle muttered in fear. Look, it's Rainbow Dash's saddlebag, Scootaloo said, bounding along the side of her friends. Maybe she's still here, and maybe she found something. A clue, too. She paused, gasping in terror when she lifted the saddlebag off the ground, only to find that it had been resting in a fresh pool of blood. Let's go back, please, Sweetie Belle cried in terror, her eyes watering and her legs trembling. Listen, do you girls hear that? Apple Bloom whispered, causing the other two to fall silent. The three fillies strained to hear the sounds of garbled cries coming from somewhere in the direction of the bloody hoof prints. Rainbow Dash! Scootaloo screamed, abandoning all logic and racing alongside the blood trail in a blind panic. Scootaloo, wait! Apple Bloom protested. She and Sweetie Belle weren't too far behind. All three fillies came to a grinding halt when a wounded Rainbow Dash sped through backwards, landing through the air with a crash to the trunk of an apple tree. Rainbow's face was bloody beaten, and blood oozed from her lips. Her left eye was swollen shut, and her legs and torso were marred together with hoof prints, bruises, indicating she had been beaten and bucked. Clasped in her right hoof was a strange-looking needle with a white shimmering substance. Somewhere in the opposite direction, the assailant laughing and shouting, won't ever go back, and you nothing but pathetic ponies, you do say or make me. Applejack! It's Applejack! Apple Bloom finally muttered, choking her words in her mind to get desperately to understand what she was saying. At the sound, Rainbow Dash's head spun around, making eye contact with the three cowering fillies. Seeing them gave Rainbow a surge of adrenaline. She leapt down right in front of them and crashed into the moments before a hoof-held spade spun and stuck in the trunk. What are you doing here? Rainbow screamed in anger, pushing all three fillies in her head in the direction she wanted them to go. Run! The Crusaders didn't need to be told twice. They ran away from the carnage as fast as their little hooves could take them. That is, except Apple Bloom, still looking shocked from the sound of her sister's voice. She deviated from the others, and she doubled backwards after Applejack. Shit! Shit! Rainbow screamed, heading back for the foolish filly and biting down on her tail before running again. No, it's Applejack! I heard her! Stop squirming! Rainbow Dash muttered angrily with the filly's tail clasped in her mouth. It wasn't long until before she caught up to Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle, whose hooves would only move a little fast. Rainbow charged ahead, pushing her way through the mass fallen branches to make way for the other Crusaders. Once on the other side, Sweetie Belle tipped over a large fallen mass and fumbled a few feet away from it. When she opened her eyes and let out an ear-piercing scream, that was a mass none other than Twilight Princess herself. She had her head laying in a fresh pool of blood. Rainbow's head turned sharply around to shout at something at the fillies, inadvertently tossing Apple Bloom into the process. However, Before she could say a word, Applejack sprang from the same thicket of branches, kicked off some of the ground with her hooves, and bucked Rainbow Dash clean from the jaw. Rainbow skidded across the ground, but made no sound aside from the garbled intake of breath. The lower half of Rainbow's jaw had been completely dislocated and now hung by the skin, exposing the carnage of her snout. The Crusaders stuck behind some of the fallen trees and fell deadly silent. Not a single of them could understand what they were seeing. Applejack created an orchard of graveyard for all the friends of Ponyville. The missing tools meant their deaths and still stuck out their mangled remains. It was nearly impossible to tell who was who anymore, with the carnage of one pony's death seeping into another's. Too traumatized to move to safety, they could only watch as the pony they once knew as Applejack descended upon Rainbow Dash, her next prey. In the light, the Crusaders could see the monster Applejack had become. Her right hoof in front had a chunk of flesh missing and was oozing sickening green pus, while the fur underneath, it was blackened along the dead. Her back legs, were having once been broken now, looked like strong with bones, and concurrently causing her stance to wind as her back hoof dragged along behind her. Her fur was marred all by the manners of scars, and matted with twigs, blood, and pieces of hair and fur that were not her own. Most disturbing of all, Applejack's eyes were completely clouded, with the exception of two black pupils staring back at Rainbow Dash without a hint of sanity or mercy. "Yeah, I told ya, you don't want to be your cure," Applejack said, spitting on Rainbow Dash, who fought against choking her own blood. "Cure?" Applebloom looked up from where she had landed, searching frantically for the needle that had been flung from Rainbow's grasp at the same moment she had. Dazed in shock, it took a moment for Applebloom to focus on her and concentrate on nothing but finding that needle. "Do y'all think there's anything left in here to cure, Rainbow?" Applejack taunted, leaning in close. "Do you still believe you're saving me?" Rainbow's eyes darted away from Applejack to spy on Applebloom, creeping up towards the needle, which was sticking out of the pile of a dead pony debris. Applejack chuckled to herself, and it swelled in her chest, until she laughed madly in Rainbow's face. "Don't you know, Rainbow? I'm telling you, that's fear the most. The most amount is crawling around your skin, squirming, wriggling inside of you, just waiting to get free." Applebloom's face lost all color as she pried the needle from the debris, having to pull out from the eye socket of another one of Applejack's victims. "Now I'm the inevitable. I am the hard bargainer of fear and messenger of the truth to silence with hope." Rainbow Dash made consciousness to effort to not look at Applebloom, and instead riffed around to the ground to keep Applejack's attention to her. Applejack took the bait, stamping her hoof on Rainbow Dash's back, leaning down close to her ear. "And that truth is the end, and ain't nothing that crept me." Applebloom waited until she was within range, then charged at her sister from behind, a needle held high in hoof. She pierced it into Applejack's flank, plunged the liquid into her bloodstream, almost as if in reflex. Applejack reared her hind legs and bucked Applebloom so hard into a nearby tree. Snap! The dark stillness of the dungeon cell was broken by the sound of approaching hoof steps. Applejack lifted her head from the cot and looked unexpectedly towards the door. Her only indication was the passing of time that came from the small window too far from her reach. When the sunlight passed over certain stones on the wall, Applejack knew what to expect her daily meals. It was the only change from the monotony of silence. This time, however, the approaching pony came entirely too early. Applejack's mind raced, hoping that she could at least learn what was going on. Some pony magicked the trait key to the lock and opened the cell door. Entering without a word, Applejack winced from the sudden brightness from her expression, slowly turned into a smile. "Twilight?" "Hello, Applejack," Twilight replied. Her voice tingled with professionalism, but Applejack only heard was used in the presence of acquaintances or important guests. "Thanks, Celestia. I was beginning to think some pony forgot it was I hear. What in the hay is going on? Twilight hesitated for a moment, giving her an answer. What, do you remember? Applejack frowned and slumped back into the cot where she'd been lying. Yeah, remember asking after me for your help and taking that strange potion of yours? But after that, things started getting hazy. The next thing I know, I'm all wrapped up in this gauze and bandaged down pain pills like they were candy, trying to get over the fact that I look like I've been some kind of terrible accident. What happened? Twilight pursed her lips and fidgeted her hooves. There was a slight tremor in her voice as if she was nervous to answer. Applejack, I don't know what you're talking about. There was no potion. You worked yourself up too hard and caused a mental break. You were spouting out nonsense and acting violently. Not only that, you did harm yourself, but you harmed several others, turning your orchard into... She paused, contemplating on how much she wanted to tell and reveal at once. Into what? Applejack asked, scowl on her face. Into a slaughtering ground. In your hysteria, you took the lives of 13 ponies and attempted to take mine and Rainbow Dash's lives as well. What in the hay are you talking about? I never harm any creature. You certainly don't even put the lives in matters of risk, best friend. And of course there was a potion. You're just the one who gave it to me in the first place. Applejack said. Twilight sighed. Applejack, I'm sorry, I don't know how to tell this to you. You can't tell me what you're lying, Applejack growled. I am the Princess of Friendship. I have ponies who rely on my guidance, but I can't be taken to blame for my mistakes of my friends. Your mental break must have caused you the same confusion. Take the blame? You're accusing me of murder, Twilight? We both know you ain't come do that for that potion. What was that thing? Why can't I remember what happened? Why didn't it make me do? Applejack shouted, wishing that she could stamp her hooves down in anger, but feared searing pain in doing so. Twilight completely ignored the outburst and continued. Princess Celestia and I don't believe in corporal punishment, and given the fact that you're assisted in saving Equestria on numerous occasions, we've decided to grant you a life sentence to be carried out here for the safety of our ponies. Why are you doing this? You know me, Twilight, Applejack muttered, her voice tremoring as her mind trained to accept her friend's betrayal. If there was such a potion, and I'm not saying there was, I would have tried. The caution is, though, adverse the effects of before giving you anything that would be considered dangerous, Twilight said, returning to that informal tone that she used to mask behind. That's it? You're all observing yourself in the guilt, blaming everything on me so you could sleep at night knowing you've done what you've done? Applejack hissed. You're the one who cared about those heinous crimes and disturbing deaths. You have no pony to blame but yourself, Twilight said, looking a little green in thought. Applejack looked up at the pony who used to be considered her friend with a cold stare that would penetrate Twilight's heart. It wasn't like her to be so cold and calculating. The Twilight she knew had to have stood with her friend, owned up to her mistakes no matter what the cost. While she rackled the brain, searching for a plausible explanation, Twilight broke the silence. I have found a cure to whatever it is to ally you, even though I was too late to save the others. I knew I could save you. If it wasn't until you're safe here that I could really focus on the draught. And there was something Celestia couldn't do, find a spell to save Equestria. That was what I do, Applejack. I'm the Princess of Friendship. I am the most powerful magic in the world, and it's my responsibility to harness the magic of the goods of every pony. Equestria can't afford to lose to both of us. So you sacrifice your friend to bury the secret? And what other element of history, honestly, Twi? The magic of friendship doesn't work without it. Turns out Starlight Glimmer may be more useful in Equestria than we thought. She wields the element now. Applejack sat dumbfounded. The life that she had passed before all these years was a flickering memory. She knew that this cell was especially made to her to rot. Why did you come here? To say goodbye and to see if I was cured? Sorry to disappoint you, but your spell worked. Twilight then bit her lip and lowered her head. If Applejack wasn't herself, she could justify this in her mind, but Applejack wouldn't give her for that. She wanted Twilight to live with her in the ways of her guilt for the rest of her life. Is Rainbow all right? Rainbow Dash is still recovering, But she should be fine, Twilight answered softly. And my family? Twilight hesitated again. She rubbed the back of her neck with her hoof nervously before answering. They're all right. I should go now. No! What is wrong? Is Big Mac still hurt? Twilight's horn ignited and made her way towards the door. Is he? He's fine, Twilight answered. And Granny? I've got to go, Applejack, Twilight said, hanging her head in shame. Apple Bloom? Twilight flinched at the mention of Apple Bloom, and Applejack picked it up on it immediately. What's wrong with Apple Bloom? Goodbye, Twilight said, choking back her tears as she closed Applejack's cell door and locked it again. Where's Apple Bloom? Applejack screamed after her. Twilight briskly walked away from the cell towards the pony guard waiting for her to guide her out. The sound of Applejack's cries were masked by the bottom of thunder outside and the new rainfall hitting against the prison wall. What happened to my sister?